Oh, that's why. 1, 2. Yeah. Okay, good, good, good. You can all hear me now. And cats. Okay, see you, Edgeless. So basically, yeah, I am gonna try and do some reading streams. And, you know, I thought this would be an interesting way of doing them. Well, I usually had my camera on while reading to show the pages. But since I have a horrible looking fingernail, I did not want people to see that nail. So right now we're just doing it as it is now. So I am going to be reading a book called Magician by Raymond E. Feist. And yes, my poor fingy, exactly. So, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Actually, I should put cats. There you go, at the top there. That's good, that's good. Okay. Is the music okay as well in the background? Where is the first page again? There it is. Plug and Thomas. Well, the storm had broken. Pug danced along the edge of the rocks. Feet finding scant purchase as he made his way along the tide pools. His dark eyes darted about as he peered into each pool under the cliff face, seeking the spiny creatures driven into shadows by the recently past storm. His boyish muscles bunched under his light shirt as he shifted the sack of sand crawlers, rock claws, and crabs plucked from his water garden. The afternoon sun sent sparkles through the sea spray swirling around him as the west wind blew his sun-streaked brown hair about. Pug set his sack down, checked to make sure it was securely tied, then squatted on a clear patch of sand. The sack was not quite full, but Pug relished the extra hour or so that he could relax. Megar, the cook, wouldn't trouble him about the time as long as the sack was almost full. Resting with his back against a large rock, Pug was soon dozing in the sun's warmth. And as why I'm using a PNG instead of my model is that I don't know how my model would react to my book being in the way of my face. So I thought it'd be better to use my PNG instead. A cool wet spray broke him hours later. He opened his eyes with a start, knowing he had stayed much too long. Westward over the sea, dark thunderheads were forming above the black outline of the Six Sisters, the small islands on the horizon. The rolling, surging clouds, with rain trailing below like some sooty veil, heralded another of sudden storms common to this part of the coast in early summer. To the south, the high bluffs of Sailor's Reef reared up against the sky as rays crashed against the base of that rocky pinnacle. White caps started to form behind the breakers, a sure sign the storm would quickly strike. Pug knew he was in danger, for the storms of summer could drown anyone on the beaches, or if serve enough, on the low ground below. He picked up his sack and started north toward the castle. As he moved among the pools, he felt the coolness of the winds turn into a deeper, wetter cold. The day to be broken by a patchwork of shadows as the first clouds passed before the sun, bright colors fading to shades of grey. Out to sea, lightning flashed against the blackness of the clouds, and a distant boom of thunder rode over the noise of the waves. Pug picked up speed when he came to the first stretch of open beach. The storm was coming in faster than he would have thought possible, driving the rising tide before it. Where was it? By the time he reached the second stretch of the tide pools, there were barely 10 feet of dry sand between Walter's cliff and edging cliff. Pug hurried as fast as it was safe across the rocks, twice nearly catching his foot. As he reached the next expanse of sand, he mistimed his jump from the last rock and landed poorly. He fell to the sand, scraping his ankle. As if waiting for the mishap, the tide surged forward, covering him for a moment. He reached out blindly and felt his sack carried away. Frantically grabbing at it, Pug lunged forward, only to have his ankle fail. He went under, gulping water. He raised his head, spluttering, coughing. He started to stand when a second wave, higher than the last, hit him in the chest, knocking him backward. Pug had grown up playing in the waves and was an experienced swimmer, but the pain of his ankle and the battering on the waves were bringing him to the edge of panic. He fought off and came up for air as the waves receded. He half swam. He half swam, half scrambled toward the cliff face, knowing the water would only be inches deep there. Pug reached the cliffs and leaned against them, keeping as much weight off the injured ankle as possible. He inched along the rock wall, while each wave brought the water higher. When Pug finally reached a place where he could make his way upward, water was swirling at his waist. He had to use all of his strength to pull himself up to the path. He lay panting a moment, then started to crawl up the pathway, unwillingly to trust his bulky ankle on his rocky footing. The first drops of rain began to fall as he scrambled along, bruising knees and shins on the rocks, until he reached the grassy top of the bluffs. Pug fell forward exhausted, panting from the exertion of the climb. The scattered drops grew into a light but steady rain. When he had caught his breath, Pug sat up and examined his swollen ankle. It was tender to touch, but he was reassured when he could move it. It was not broken. He would have to limp the entire way back, but with the threat of drowning on the beach behind him, he felt relatively buoyant. Pug would be a drenched, chilled wretch when he reached town. He would have to find a lodging there, for the gates of the castle would have been closed for the night. His tender ankle, he would not attempt to climb the wall behind the stables. Besides, should he wait and slip into a keep the next day, William Meggar would have words for him. But if he was caught coming over the wall, Swordmaster Fanon or Horsemaster Algon would surely have a lot worse in store for him than words. While he rested, the rain took on an insistent quality, and the sky darkened as the late afternoon sun was completely engulfed in storm clouds. His momentary relief was replaced with anger at himself for losing the sack of sand claws. His displeasure doubled when he considered his folly at falling asleep. Had he remained at the rake, he would have made the return trip unhurriedly, would not have sprained his ankle, and would have time to explore the scrambled above the bluffs for the smooth stones he prized so dearly for slinging. Now there'd be no stones, and there would be at least another week before he could return. If Meggar then sent another boy instead, which was likely now that he was returning empty-handed, Pug's attention shifted to the discomfort of sitting in the rain, and he decided it was time to move on. He stood and tested his ankle. It protested such treatment, but he could get along with it. He limped over the grass to where he had left his belongings, and picked up his rucksack, staff, and sling. He swore an oath he had heard soldiers at the keep use when he found the rucksack ripped apart, as bread and cheese missing. Raccoons, or possibly sand lizards, he thought. He tossed the now useless sack aside and wondered at his misfortune. Taking a deep breath, he leaned on his staff as he started across the low rolling hills that divided the bluffs from the road. Stands of small trees were scattered over the landscape, and Pug regretted there was a more substantial shelter nearby, for there was none upon the bluffs. He would be no better for trudging to town than for staying under a tree. The wind picked up, and Pug felt the first cold bite against his red back. He shivered and hurried his pace as well as he could. The small trees started to bend before the wind, and Pug felt as if a great hand was pushing at his back. Reaching the road as he turned north, he heard the eerie sound of the great forest off to the east, the wind whistling through the branches of the ancient oaks, adding to its already foreboding aspect. The dark glades of the forest were probably no more perilous than the King's Road, but remembered tales of outlaws and other, less human malefactors stirred the hairs on the boy's neck. Cutting across, the King's Road, Pug gained a little shelter in the gully that ran alongside it. The wind intensified, and rain stung his eyes, bringing tears to the already red cheeks. A gust caught him, and he stumbled off balance for a moment. Water was gathering in the roadside gully, and he had to step carefully to keep from losing his footing in unexpectedly deep puddles. For nearly an hour he made his way through the ever-growing storm. The road turned northwest, bringing him almost full face in the howling wind. Pug leaned into the wind, his shirt ripping out behind him. He swallowed hard to force down the choking panic rising within him. He knew he was in danger now, for the storm was gaining in a fury far beyond normal for this time of year. One second. No, that's it. Just doing something for a second. Okay. Where was I? Oh no. Northwest, Dragon Bell. And down. Great ragged bolts of lightning lit the dark landscape, briefly outlined the trees and road in harsh, brilliant white and opaque black. The dazzling after images, black and white reversed, stayed with him for a moment each time, confusing his senses. Enormous thunder pearls sounding overhead felt like physical blows. Now his fear of the storm outweighed his fear of imagined brigands and goblins. He decided to walk along the trees near the road. The wind would be lessened somewhat by the boles of the oaks. As Pug closed upon the forest, a crashing sound brought him to a halt. In the gloom of the storm, he could barely make out the form of a black forest boar as it burst out of the undergrowth. The pig tumbled from the brush, lost its footing, then scrambled to its feet a few yards away. Pug could see it clearly as it stood there regarding him, swinging its head from side to side. Two large tusks seemed to glow in the dim light as they dripped rainwater. Fear made its eyes wide and it pawed at the ground. The forest pigs were bad-tempered at best, but normally avoided humans. This one was panic-stricken by the storm, and Pug knew if it charged he could be badly gored or killed. How many pages is there to the next chapter? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 5. Okay, not too bad. Hold up, I'll be right back as I need to get some water for my throat because it's very dry. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Where was I? There it is, standing rock still. Pug made ready to swing his staff, but hoped the pig would return to the woods. The boar's head raised, testing the boy's smell on the wind. Its pink eyes seemed to glow as it trembled with indecision. A sound made it turn toward the trees for a moment, then it dropped its head and charged. Pug swung his staff, bringing it down in a glancing blow to the side of the pig's head, turning it. The pig slid sideways in the muddy footing, hitting Pug in the legs. He went down as the pig slipped past. Lying on the ground, Pug saw the boar skitter about as it turned to charge again. Suddenly the pig was upon him, and Pug had no time to stand. He thrust the staff before him in a vain attempt to turn the animal again. The boar dodged the staff and Pug tried to roll away, but the weight fell across his body. Pug covered his face with his hands. Hey, thank you, Inu. Thank you for the lurky turkey. Face. His arms close to his chest, expecting to be gorged. His hands keeping his arms close to his chest. No. After a moment, he realized the Pug was still. Uncovering his face, he discovered the pig lying across his lower legs, a black feathered cloth-yard arrow protruding from its side. Pug looked toward the forest. A man garbed in brown leather was standing near the edge of the trees, quickly wrapping a yeoman's longbow with an oiled cloth cover. Once the valuable weapon was protected from further abuse by the weather. The man crossed to stand over the boy and beast. He was cloaked and hooded, his face hidden. He knelt next to Pug and shouted over the sound of the wind. Are you right, boy? As he lifted the dead boar easily from Pug's legs, bones broken. I don't think so, Pug yelled back, taking account of himself. His right side smarted, and his legs felt equally abused. With his ankle still tender, he was feeling ill-used today, but nothing seemed broken or permanently damaged. Large, meaty hands lifted him to his feet. Here, the man commanded, handing him his staff and the bow. Pug took them while the stranger quickly gutted the boar with a large hunter's knife. He completed his work and turned to Pug. Come with me, boy. You had best lodge with my master and me. It's not far, but we'd best hurry. This storm will get worse before it's over. Can you walk? Taking an unsteady step, Pug nodded. Without a word, the man shouldered the pig and took his bow. Come, he said, as he turned towards the forest. He set off at a brisk pace, which Pug had to scramble to match. The forest cut the fury of the storm so little that conversation was impossible. A lightning flash lit the scene for a moment, and Pug caught a glimpse of the man's face. Pug tried to remember if he had seen a stranger before. Yet the look common to the hunters and foresters that lived in the forest are Grady, large-shouldered, tall and solidly built. Oh. I will stay silent as the ads finish. And we're back. Just he had dark hair and beard, and a raw, weather-beaten appearance of one who spends most of his time outdoors. For a few fanciful moments, the boy wondered if he might be some member of an outlaw band hiding in the heart of a forest. He gave up the notion, for no outlaw would trouble himself with an obviously penniless keep boy, remembering the man had mentioned having a master. Pug suspected he was a franklin, one who lived on the estate of a landholder. He would be in the holder's service, but not bound to him as a bondsman. The franklins were freeborn, giving a share of the crop or herd in exchange for the use of land. He must be freeborn. No bondsman would be allowed to carry a longbow, for they are much too valuable and dangerous. Still, Pug couldn't remember any landholdings in the forest. Hey, Berserker. How you doing? Just doing a reading stream at the moment. The book that I'm reading is on the screen. So yeah. Yeah, that's good, that's good. We'll hopefully find this stream relaxing as I read the story. There was a mystery to a boy, but a toll of the day's abuses was quickly driving away any curiosity. After what seemed to be hours, the man walked into a thicket of trees. Pug nearly lost him in the darkness, but the sun had set some time before, taking with it what faint light the storm had allowed. He followed the man more from the sound of his footfalls and unawareness of his presence than from sight. Pug sensed he was on a path through the trees, where his footsteps meant no resisting brush or detritus. From where they had been moments before, the path would be difficult to find in daylight, impossible at night unless it was already known. Soon they entered a clearing, in the midst of which sat a small stone cottage. Light shone through a single window, and smoke rose from the chimney. They crossed the clearing, and Pug wondered at the storm's relative barrenness in this one spot in the forest. Hey, that's awesome! Well done, Berserker. That's awesome. Well done. Yeah. Celebration times, come on. Daylight. Once before the door, the man stood to one side and said, "You go in, boy. I must dress the pig." Nodding dumbly, Pug pushed open the wooden door and stepped in. Close that door, boy. You'll give me a chill and cause me my death." Pug jumped to a boy, slamming the door harder than intended. He turned, taking in the scene before him. The interior of the cottage was a small single room. Against one wall was a fireplace, with a good-sized hearth before it. A bright, cheery fire burned, casting a warm glow. Next to the fireplace, a table sat, behind which a heavy-set, yellow-robed figure rested on a bench. His grey hair and beard nearly covered his entire head, except for a pair of vivid blue eyes that twinkled in the firelight. A long pipe emerged from the beard, producing heroic clouds of pale smoke. Pug knew the man. "Master Culkin," he began, for the man was the Duke's magician and advisor, a familiar face around the castle keep. Culkin leveled a gaze at Pug, instead a deep voice given to rich, ruling sounds and powerful tones. So you know me then? Yes, sir, from the castle. What is your name, boy, from the keep? Pug, Master Gogan. Now I remember you. The magician absently waved his hand. Do not call me master, Pug, though I am rightly called a master in my arts, he said with a merry crinkling around his eyes. I am higher born than you, it is true, but not by much. Come, there is a blanket hanging by the fire, and you are drenched. Right. Hang your clothes to dry and stay there. He pointed to a bench opposite him. Pug did as he was bid, keeping an eye on the magician the entire time. He was a member of the Duke's court, but still a magician, an object of suspicion, generally held in low esteem by the common folk. If a farmer had a cow calf, a monster, or blight struck the crops, villagers were apt to ascribe to it to the work of some magician lurking in nearby shadows. In times not too far past, they would have stoned Koken from Crady as like as not. His position with the Duke earned him the tolerance of the townfolk now, but old fears died slowly. After his garments were hung, Pug sat down. He started when he saw a pair of red eyes regarding him from just beyond the magician's table. A scaled head rose up above the tabletop and studied the boy. Gogan laughed at the boy's discomfort. Come, boy, Fontes will not eat you. He dropped his hands to the head of the creature, who sat next to him on his bench, and rubbed above his eye ridges. It closed its eyes and gave forth a soft crooning sound, not unlike the purring of a cat. Pug shut his mouth. Richard popped open with surprise, then asked, Is he truly a dragon, sir? The magician laughed, a rich, good-natured sound. Bedtimes, he thinks he is a boy. He is boy. Fantis is a fire drake, cousin to a dragon, though of smaller stature. The creature opened one eye and fastened it on the magician. But of equal heart, Koken quickly added, and the drake closed his eye again. The Koken spoke softly, in conspiratorial tones. He is very clever, so mind what you say to him. He is a creature of finely fashioned sensibilities. Pug nodded that he would. Can he breathe fire? He asked, his eyes wide with wonder. To any boy of 13, even a cousin. Hey, Simmy! Yeah, thank you. How you doing, Simmy? You doing good? Just doing a reading stream here. Hope you relax, have a good time, and, enjoy your stay here while I read the book that is posted on the screen. You can see there. But thank you for stopping in by, Simmy. Mwah. When the mood suits him, he can belch out a flame or two. though he seems rarely in the mood. I think it's due to the rich diet I supply him with, boy. He has not had to hunt for years, so he's something out of practice in the raise of drakes. In truth, I spoiled him shamelessly. Pug found the notion somehow reassuring. If the magician cared enough to spoil this creature, no matter how outlandish, then he seemed somehow more human, less mysterious. Pug studied Fontes, admiring how the fire brought golden highlights to his emerald scales. About the size of a small hound, the drake possessed a long, sinuous neck atop which rested an alligator-like head. His wings were folded across his back, and two clawed feet extended before him, aimlessly pawing the air, while Culkin scratched behind bony eye ridges. His long tail swung back and forth, inches above the floor. The door opened, and the big bowman entered, holding a dressed and spitted loin of pork before him. Without a word, he crossed to the fireplace and set the meat to cook. Fontes raised his head, using his long neck to good advantage to peek over the table. With a flick of his forked tongue, the drake jumped down and in stately fashion ambled over the hearth. He selected a warm spot before the fire and curled up to doze away the rate before dinner. Hold up, more water. The Franklin unfastened his cloak and hung it on a peg by the door. Storm will pass afore dawn, I'm thinking. He returned to the fire and prepared a basting of wine and herbs for the pig. Pug was startled to see a large scar that ran down the left side of a man's face, showing red and angry in the firelight. Colgan waved his pipe in Franklin's direction. Knowing my tight-lipped man here, you'll not have made his proper acquaintance. Me chap, this boy is Pug, gonna keep at Castle Creedy. Me chap gave a brief nod, then returned to tending the roasting loin. Pug nodded back, though a bit late for me chap to notice. I never thought to thank you for saving me from the boar. Me champ replied, There's no need for thanks, boy. Had I not started a beast, it's unlikely I would have charged you. He left the earth and crossed over to another part of the room, took some brown dough from a cloth-covered bucket and started kneading. Well, sir, said Pug to Kogan, it was his arrow that killed the pig. It was indeed fortunate that he was following the animal. Kogan laughed. The poor creature, who is our most welcome guest for dinner, happened to be as much a victim of circumstance as yourself. Pug looked perplexed. I don't follow, sir. Kogan stood and took down an object from the topmost shelf on his bookcase and placed it on the table before the boy. was I? It was wrapped in a cover of dark blue velvet, so Pug knew at once it must be a prize of great value for such an expensive material to be used for covering. Koken removed the velvet, revealing an orb of crystal that gleamed in the firelight. Pug gave an ah of pleasure at the beauty of it, for it was without apparent flaw and splendid in its simplicity of form. Koken pointed to the sphere of glass. This device was fashioned as a gift by Althafane of Karse, a most puissant artificer of magic, who thought me worthy of such a present, as I have done him a favor of Turim past. But that is of little matter, having just this day returned from the company of Master Althafane. I was testing his token, looking deep into the orb. Pug fixed his eyes on the ball. Where was I? Yeah, Pug fixed his eyes on the ball and tried to follow the flicker of firelight that seemed to play deep within its structure. The reflections of the room multiplied 100-fold, merged and danced as his eyes tried to fasten upon each aspect within the orb. They flowed and blended, and grew cloudy and obscure. A soft red glow at the center of the ball replaced the red of firelight, and Pug felt his gaze become trapped by its pleasing warmth. Like the warmth of the kitchen at the keep, he thought absently. Suddenly, the milky light within the bowl vanished, and Pug could see an image of the kitchen before his eyes. Fat Alfan, the cook, was making pastries, licking the sweet crumbs from his fingers. This brought the wrath of Megar, the head cook, down upon his head, for Megar considered a disgusting habit. Hey, Gummy. Pug laughed at the scene, one he had witnessed many times before, and it vanished. Suddenly he felt tired. Kogan wrapped the orb in the cloth and put it away. How you doing, Gummy? You doing good? How's the movie? Did you finish it? You did well, boy, he said thoughtfully. He stood, watching the boy for a moment, as if considering something, then sat down. Okay, that's good, that's good. Where was I before? I would not have suspected you of being able to fashion such a clear image in one try, but you seem to be more than you first appear to be. Sir? Never mind, Pug. He paused for a moment and said, I was using that toy for the first time, judging how far I could send my sight, when I spied you making for the road. Yeah, hey Kay, how you doing? Mwah. Uh, from your limp and bruised condition, I judged that you'd never reach town, so I sent me Champ to fetch you. Pug looked embarrassed by the unusual attention, coloring rising to his cheeks. He said, with a 13-year-old's high estimation of his own ability, "You needn't have done that, sir. I reached the town in due time." Yeah, it's all the cozy time now. Kogan smiled. Perhaps, but then again, perhaps not. The storm is unseasonably severe and perilous for traveling. Pug listens to the soft tattoo of rain, tatter of rain on the roof of the cottage. The storm seemed to have slackened, and Pug doubted the magician's words. As if reading the boy's thoughts, Kogan said, "Doubt me not, Pug. This glade is protected by more than the great bulls. Should you pass beyond the circle of oaks that marks the edge of my holding, you would feel the storm's fury. Me, champ, how do you gauge this wind?" Meacham put down the bread dough he was kneading and thought for a moment. "Near as bad as a storm that beached 6 ships 3 years back." He paused for a moment, as if reconsidering the estimate, then nodded his endorsement. "Yes, nearly as bad, though it won't blow so long." Look, thought back 3 years the storm had blown a great gun trading fleet bound for Grady into the rocks of sailors' grief. At its height, the guards on the castle walls were forced to stay in the towers, lest they be blown down. If this storm was that served, then Colgan's magic was impressive, for outside the cottage it sounded no worse than a spring rain. Colgan sat back on the bench, occupied with trying to light his extinguished pipe. As he produced a large cloud of sweet white smoke, Pug's attention wandered to the case of books standing behind the magician. His lips moved silently as he tried to discern what was written on the bindings, but could not. Colgan lifted an eyebrow and said, "So you can read, aye?" Pug startled, alarmed they might have offended the magician by intruding on his domain. Colgan, sensing his embarrassment, said, "It is all right, boy. It is no crime to know letters." Puck felt his discomfort diminish. "I can read a little, sir. Megard the cook has shown me how to read the tallies on the stores laid away for the kitchen on the cellars. I know some numbers as well." "Numbers too," the magician exclaimed good-naturedly. "Well, you are something of a rare bird." He reached behind himself and pulled out one volume, bound in red-brown leather, from the shelf. He opened it, squinting at one page, then another, and at last found the page that seemed to meet his requirements. He turned the open book around and laid it upon the table before Pug. Kogan pointed to a page illuminated by a magnificent design of snakes, flowers, and twining vines in a colorful design around a large letter in the upper left corner. Read this, boy. Pug had never seen anything remotely like it. His lessons had been on plain parchment, with letters fashioned in Megar's blunt script, using a charcoal stick. So I was taking some water. He sat, fascinated by details of work, then realized the magician was staring at him. Regaining his wits, he began to read. And then there came a summonings from. He looked at the word, stumbling over the complex combinations that are new to him. Zakara. He paused, looking at Kogan to see if it was correct. The magician nodded for him to continue. Where north was to be forgotten, least the heart of the empire languish and all be lost. And though of Bosnia from birth, those soldiers still were loyal to great cash in their service. So for her great need, they took up their arms and put on their armor and quit Bosnia, taking ship to the south to save all from destruction. Kogan said, "That's enough," and gently closed the cover of the book. "You're well gifted with letters for a keep, boy." "This book, sir, what is it?" asked Kogan. Asked Pug, as Kogan took it from him. "I've never seen anything like it." Kogan looked at Pug for a moment, with a gaze that made him uncomfortable again, then smiled, breaking the tension. As he put the book back, he said, It is a history of the land, boy. It's given as a gift by the abbot of an Isphrian monastery. It is a translation of a Kashan text over 100 years ago. Pug nodded and said, "It all sounded very strange. What does it tell of?" Kogan once more looked at Pug, as if trying to see something inside of the boy, then said, "Long time ago, Pug, all these lands from this endless sea, across the Grey Tower Mountains to the Bitter Sea, were part of the empire of the Great Cash." far to the east existed a small kingdom on one small island called Rilanon. That grew to engulf its neighboring island kingdoms, and it became the Kingdom of the Isles. Later, it expanded again the mainland, and while it was still the Kingdom of the Isles, most of us simply call it the Kingdom. We who live in Grady are part of the Kingdom, though we live as far from the capital city of Rylanon as one can and still be within its boundaries. Once, many long years ago, the Empire of Great Cash abandoned these lands for it engulfed in a long and bloody conflict with its neighbors to the south, the Keshan Confederacy. Pug was caught up in the grandeur of lost empires, but hungry enough to notice Meacham. Meacham was putting several small loaves of dark bread in the hearth oven. He turned his attention back to the magician, who were to crush the Keshan Confederacy. Koken finished for the boy. It had a small group of nations who had existed as tributaries to Great Cash for centuries. A dozen years before the book was written, they united against their oppressor. Each alone was insufficient to contest with Great Cash, but united they proved its match. Too close a match, for the war dragged on year after year. The Empire was forced to strip its northern provinces of their legions and set them south, leaving the north open to the advances of the new, younger kingdom. Where were they? It was Duke Bork's grandfather, youngest son of the kingdom, who brought the army westward, extending the western realm. Since then, all of what was once the old imperial province of Bosnia, except for the free cities of Natal, have been called the Duke of Grady, the Duchy of Grady. Yeah, all the cookies, Gummy. Pug thought for a moment, then said, I think I'd like to travel to this Great Cache someday. Meacham snorted, then closed a laugh. And what would you be traveling as? A freebooter. Pug felt his face flush. Freebooters were landless men, mercenaries who fought for pay. Of course, one for you, Gummy. Actually, I should turn the lights. It's been a bit dark in here. Hold up 1 second. I'll be right back. Yeah, all the small cookies, isn't it? Yeah. Kogan said, "Perhaps you might someday, Pug. The ray is long and full of pearl, but it's not unheard of for a brave and hearty soul to survive the journey. Stranger things have been known to happen." The talk at the table turned to more common topics, for the magician had been at the Southern Keep, at Curse, for over a month, and wanted to gossip of Grady. When the bread was done baking, Meatchamp served it hot, carved the pork loin, and brought out plates of cheese and greens. Pug had never eaten so well in his life. Even when he had worked in the kitchen, his position as keep boy earned him only meager fare. Twice during dinner, Pug found the magician regarding him intently. When the meal was over, Meatchamp cleared the table and began washing the dishes with clean sand and fresh water. While Kogan and Pug sat talking. Excuse me. A single scrap of meat remained on the table, which Kogan tossed over to Fantas, who lay before the fire. The Drake opened one eye to regard the morsel. He pondered the choice between his comfortable resting place and a juicy scrap for a moment. Then moved the necessary 6 inches to gulp down the prize and close his eyes again. Kogan lit his pipe, and once he was satisfied with his production of smoke, he said, "What are your plans when you reach manhood, boy?" Pug was fighting off sleep, but Kogan's question brought him alert again. The time of choosing, when the boys of the town and keep were taken into apprenticeship, was close, and Pug became excited as he said, "This midsummer's day, I hope to take the Duke's service under Swordmaster Fanon." Kogan regarded his slight ghast. "I'd have thought you still a year or two away from apprenticeship, Pug." Meatchamp gave out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a grunt. "Bit small to be lugging around a sword and shield, aren't you, boy?" Pug flushed. He was the smallest boy of his age in the castle. Meager, the cook, said I may be late coming to my growth. He said with a faint note of defiance. "No one knows who my parents were. They have no choice, no notion of what to expect." "Orphan, is it? asked Meacham, raising one eyebrow, his most expressive gesture yet. Pug nodded. I was left to the priests of Dala in a mountain abbey by a woman who claimed she found me on the road. They brought me to the keep, for they had no way to care for me. Yes, injected Colgan. I remember when those who worshipped the shield of the Reek first brought you to the castle. You're no more than a baby fresh from the teats. It's only through the Duke's kindness that you are a free man today. He felt it a lesser evil to free a bondsman's son than to bond a free man's. Without proof, it was his right to have you declared bondsman. Meacham said in a non-committal tone, "A good man, the Duke." Pug had heard the story of his origin 100 times before from Magaya in the kitchen of the castle. He felt completely wrung out and could barely keep his eyes open. Colgan noticed and signaled Maychamp. The tall Franklin took some blankets from the shelf and prepared a sleeping pallet. By the time he finished, Pug had fallen asleep with his head on the table. The large man's hands lifted him gently from the stool and placed him on the blankets, then covered him. Fontes opened his eyes and recording a sleeping boy. With a wolfish yawn, he scrambled over next to Pug and snuggled in close. Pug shifted his weight in his sleep and draped one arm over the drake's neck. The fire drake gave an approving rumble deep in his throat and closed his eyes again. The forest is quiet. Chapter 2. The slight afternoon breeze stirred the tall oaks and cut the day's heat, while rustling the leaves only slightly. Mr. Turtle, Sippy, Gummy. The birds who would raise a ruckus chorus at sunrise and sundown were mostly quiet at this time of morning. The faint tang of sea salt mixed with the sweet smell of flowers and pungency of decaying leaves. What's up, Gummy? Why the side eyes? Yeah. And I was just reading the cats. Just seeing who's there. Pug and Thomas walked slowly along the path with the aimless weaving steps of boys who have no particular place to go and ample time to get there. shied a small rock at an imagined target, then turned to look at his companion. You don't think your mother was mad, do you? He asked. Thomas smiled. No, she understands how things are. She has seen other boys they of choosing, and truthfully, are more of hindrance than a help in the kitchen today. Pug nodded. He had spilled a precious pot of honey as he carried it to Alfan, the pastry cook. Then he had dumped an entire tray of fresh bread loaves as he took them from the oven. I made something of a fool of myself today, Thomas. Thomas laughed. He was a tall boy with sandy hair and bright blue eyes. With a quick smile, he was well liked in the keep, in spite of a boyish tendency to find trouble. He is Pug's closest friend, more brother than friend, and for that reason Pug earned some measure of acceptance from other boys, for they all regarded Thomas as their unofficial leader. Thomas said, You're no more fool than I. At least you didn't forget to hang the beef sides high. Pug grinned. Anyway, the Duke's hounds are happy. Sniggered, then laughed. She is hangry, isn't she? Thomas laughed along with his friend. She is mad. Still, the dog only ate a little before she shooed them off. Besides, she's mostly mad at father. She claims the choosing's only an excuse for all the Craftsmasters to sit around smoking pipes, drinking ale and swapping tales of old day. She says they already know who will choose which boy. Pug said, from what the other ones say. She's not alone in that opinion. They grinned at Thomas, probably not wrong either. Thomas lost his smile. She truly doesn't like it when he's not in the kitchen to oversee things. I think she knows this, which is why she tossed us out of the keep for the morning, so she wouldn't take out her temper on us, or at least you. He added with a questioning smile, I swear you're her favorite. Pug's grin returned and he laughed again. Well, I do cause less trouble. With a playful punch to the arm, Thomas said, You mean you get caught less often? Pug pulled his sling out from within his shirt. If you come back with a brace of partridge or quail, you might regain some of her good temper. Thomas smiled. She might, he agreed, taking out his own sling. Both boys were excellent slingers, Thomas being undoubted champion among the boys, edging Pug by only a little. Okay, Gummy. It was unlikely either could bring down a bird on the ring, but should they find one at rest, there's a fair chance they might hit it. Besides, it'd give them something to do to pass the hours and perhaps for a time forget the choosing. With exaggerated stealth, they crept along, playing the part of hunters. Thomas led the way as they left the footpath, leading for the watering pool they knew lay not too far distance. Where was I? It was improbable they would spot game this time of the day, unless they simply blundered across it. But if there were any to be found, it was most likely would be near the pool. Where was I? Blah, blah. The woods to northwest. Where is it? The woods to northeast of the town of Grady were less forbidding than the great forest to the south. Many years of harvesting trees for lumber had given the green glades a sunlit airiness, not found in deep haunts of the southern forest. The keep boys had often played here over the years. With small imagination, the woods were transferred into a wondrous place, a green world of high adventure. Some of the greatest deeds known had taken place here. Daring escapes, dread quests, and mightily encountered battles had been witnessed by the silent trees as boys gave vent to their youthful dreams of coming manhood. Foul creatures, mighty monsters, and base outlaws had all been fought and vanquished, often accompanied by death of a great hero, with appropriate last words to his mourning companions. All managed with just enough time left to return to the keep for supper. Was that an ad break or was it something else? Oops. There it is. Ad break. Hey, thank you for the raid, Stop Down. I'm a wolf cat mutation laying box eating cookies. I hope you enjoy your stay. I am a variety streamer, and today we are doing some streaming, well, reading of a book, as you can see. Hold up, let me. Yeah, thank you. Hope you eat well. Hey, thank you for the raid. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, anytime, Ultra. So, yeah, I'm doing something different today. I am doing a reading stream, and I'm reading this book here that is up on the screen. And it's a nice, comforting stream, and hope you enjoy your stay. And for all who came in, please go get some food, water, go to toilets, go sleep if you need to, and as I said, enjoy your stay. I should actually go back a bit, because I forgot I was muted. Pug counted quickly. He has 14 points. Thomas nodded in agreement. He must be the oldest buck in the forest. The stag turned his attention in the boy's direction, flicking an ear nervously. They froze, not wishing to frighten off such a beautiful creature. For long silent minutes, the stag studied the rise, nostrils flaring, then slowly lowered his head to the pool and drank. Thomas gripped Pug's shoulder and inclined his head to one side. Pug followed Thomas' motion and saw a figure walking silently into a clearing. Here's a tall man, dressed in leather clothing, dyed forest green, and across his back hung a long bow, and at his belt a hunter's knife. His green cloak's hood was thrown back, and he walked toward the stag with a steady, even pace. Thomas said, "It's Martin." Pug also recognized the Duke's head huntsmaster. An orphan like Pug, Martin had come to be known as Longbow by those in the castle, as he had few equals with that weapon. Something of a mystery, Martin Longbow was so well liked by the boys, for while he was aloof with the adults in the castle, he was always friendly and accessible to the boys. As huntsmaster, he was also the Duke's forester. His duties absented him from the castle for days, even weeks at a time, as he kept his trackers busy looking for signs of poaching, possible fire dangers, migrating goblins, or outlaws camping in the forests. But when he was in the castle and not organizing a hunt for a duke, he always had time for the boys. His dark eyes were always merry when they pestered him with questions of wood lore or for tales of the lands near the boundaries of Grady. He seemed to possess unending patience, which sets him apart from most of the craftsmasters in the town and keep. Martin came up to his stag, gently reached out, and touched his neck. The great head swung up, and the stag nuzzled Martin's arm. Softly, Martin said, "If you walk out slowly, without speaking, he might let you approach." Pug and Thomas exchanged startled glances, and stepped into the clearing. They walked slowly around the edge of the pool, the stag following their movements with his head, trembling slightly. Martin patted him reassuringly, and he quieted. Thomas and Pug came to stand beside the hunter, and Martin said, "Reach out and touch him, slowly, so as not to frighten him." Where was I? Pug began to reach out, and the stag retreated a step. Martin crooned to the stag in a language Pug had never heard before, and the animal stood still. Pug touched him and marveled at the feel of his coat, so like the cured hides he had touched before, yet so different, for a feel of life pulsing under his fingertips. Suddenly the stag backed off and turned. Then with a single bounding leap, he was gone among the trees. Martin Longbow chuckled and said, "Just as well. It wouldn't do to have him become too friendly with men. Those antlers would quickly end up over some poacher's fireplace." Thomas whispered, "He's beautiful." Martin Longbow nodded, his eyes fastened upon the spot where the stag had vanished into the woods. "That he is, Thomas." Pug said, "I thought you hunted stags." Martin, "How?" Martin said, "Old Whitebeard and I have something of an understanding, Pug. I hunt only bachelor stags. Without those, or those too old to calve, when Whitebeard loses his harem to some younger buck some day, I may take him. Now each leaves the other to his own way. The day will come when I look at them down the shaft of an owl." He smiled at the boys. "I won't know until then if I shall let the shaft fly. Perhaps I will, perhaps I won't." He fell silent for a time, as if the thought of Whitebeard's becoming old was saddening. Then, as a light breeze rustled the branches, said, "Now, what brings two such bold hunters into Duke's woods in the early morning?" "There must be 1,000 things left undone with the Midsummer Festival this afternoon." Thomas answered, "My mother tossed us out of the kitchen. We are more trouble than not with the choosing today." His voice died away, and he felt suddenly embarrassed. Much of Martin's mysterious reputation stemmed from when he first came to Grady. At his time for the choosing, he had been placed directly with the old huntmaster by the Duke, rather than standing before the assembled grassmasters with the other boys his age. This violation of one of the oldest traditions known had offended many people in town, though none would dare openly express such feelings to Lord Warwick. As was natural, Martin became the object of their ire rather than the Duke. Over the years, Martin had more than justified Lord Berwick's decision, but still most people were troubled by Duke's special treatment of him than that one day. Even after 12 years, some people still regarded Martin Longbow as being different and as such worthy of distrust. Thomas said, "I'm sorry, Martin." Martin nodded in acknowledgement, but without humor. "I understand, Thomas. I may not have had to endure uncertainty, but I've seen many others wait for the day of choosing." Taking some water. Third, quenched. Time to continue. Martin shook his head, a wistful expression playing across his even features. "I had thought that, in light of your worry, you might fail to observe the obvious. But you've a short wit about you, Pug." Thomas didn't understand what they were saying for a moment. Then comprehension dawned. Then it was like no apprentices. Martin raised a finger to his lips. "Not a word, lad. No, with young Gert, chosen last year, I have a full company of trackers." Thomas was disappointed. He wished more than anything to take service with Swordmaster Fallon, but should he not be chosen as soldier, then he would prefer the life of the forester under Martin. Now his second choice was denied him. After a moment of dark brooding, he brightened. Perhaps Martin didn't choose him because Fallon already had. Seeing his friend entering a cycle of elation and depression as he considered all the possibilities, Pug said, "You haven't been in the keep for nearly a month, Martin." He put away the sling he had still held and asked, "Where have you kept yourself?" Martin looked at Pug as the boy instantly regretted his question. As friendly as Martin could be, he was still a huntsmaster. A member of the Duke's household, and keep boys did not make a habit of questioning the comings and goings of the Duke's staff. Martin relieved Pug's embarrassment with a slight smile. "I've been to Elvendar. Queen Agalariana had ended her 20 years of mourning the death of her husband, the Elf King. There is great celebration." Pug was surprised by the answer. To him, as to most people in Grady, the elves were little more than legend, but Martin had spent his youth near the elven forests. Right, what time is it? But Martin spent his youth near the elven forests, as one of the few humans to come and go through those forests to the north at will. There's another thing that set Martin Longbow apart from others. While Martin had shared elvish lore with the boys before, it was the first time in Pug's memory he had spoken of his relationship to the elves. Pug stammered, "You fast with the elves, Queen?" Martin assumed a pose of modest inconsequence. "Well, I sat at the table farthest from the throne, but yes, I was there." Seeing the unasked questions in their eyes, he continued, "You know, as a boy, I was raised by the monks of Silban's Abbey, near the Elven Forest. I played with elven children before I came here. I hunted with Prince Calin and his cousin Gallian." Thomas nearly jumped with excitement. The elves were a subject holding a particular fascination for him. "Did you know King Aidan?" Martin's expression clouded and his eyes narrowed. His manner suddenly becoming stiff. Thomas saw Martin's reaction and said, "I'm sorry, Martin. Did I say something wrong?" Martin reiterated apologies. "No fault of yours, Thomas," he said, his manner softening somewhat. "The elves do not use the names of those who have gone to the Blessed Isles, especially those who have died untimely. They believe to do so recalls those spoken of from their journey there, denying them their final rest. I respect their beliefs." "Well, to answer you, no, I never met them. He was killed when I was only a small boy, but I've heard the stories of his deeds, and he was a good and wise king by all accounts." Martin looked about. "It approaches moon. We should return to the keep." He began to walk toward the path, and the boys fell in beside him. "What was the feast like, Martin?" asked Thomas. Pug sighed as the hunter began to speak of the marvels of Elvindar. He was also fascinated by tales of elves, but to nowhere near the degree Thomas was. Thomas could endure hours of tales of the people of the Elven Forest, regardless of the speaker's credibility. At least, Puck considered, in the Huntmaster, they had a dependable eyewitness. Martin's voice droned on, and Pug's attention wandered, as he again found himself pondering the choosing. No matter what he told himself, worry was useless. He worried. He found he was facing the approaching of this afternoon with something akin to dread. Okay, so still a few pages to go. Up. Meow. Oops. Hit my mic there. The boys stood in the courtyard. It was midsummer, and the day that ended one year marked the beginning of another. Today, everyone in the castle would be counted 1 year older. For the milling boys, this was significant, for today was the last day of their boyhood. Today was the choosing. Pug tugged at the collar of his new tunic. It wasn't really new, being one of Thomas's old ones. But it was the newest Pug had ever owned. Magaya, Thomas' mother, had taken it in for the smaller boy to ensure he was presentable before the Duke at his court. Magaya, and her husband, Maker, the cook, were as close to being parents to the orphan as anyone in the keep. They tended his ills, saw that he was fed, and boxed his ears when he deserved it. They also loved him as if he were Thomas's brother. Pug looked around. The other boys all wore their best, for this was one of the most important days of their young lives. Each stand before the assembled craftmasters and members of Duke's staff, and each would be considered for an apprentice's post. There was a ritual, its origins lost in time, for the choices had already been made. The crafters and the Duke's staff had spent many hours discussing each boy's merits with one another and knew which boys they'd call. The practice of having the boys between 8 and 13 years of age work in the crafts and services had proved to a rise course over the years in fitting the best suited to each craft. In addition, it provided a pool of semi-skilled individuals for the other crafts should the need arise. The drawback to this system was that certain boys were not chosen for a craft or a staff position. Occasionally, there'd be too many boys for a single position, or no lad judged fit even though there was an opening. Even when the number of boys and openings seemed well matched, as it did this year, there's no guarantees. For those who stood in doubt, it was an anxious time. Pug scuffed his bare feet absently in the dust. Unlike Thomas, who seemed to do well at anything he tried, Pug often guilty of trying too hard and bungling his tasks. He looked around and noticed that a few of the other boys also showed signs of tension. Some were joking roughly, pretending no concern over whether they're chosen or not. Others stood like Pug, lost in their thoughts, trying not to dwell on what they should do they not be chosen. If he was not chosen, Pug, like the others, would be free to leave Grady to try to find the craft in another town or city. If he stayed, he would have to either farm the Duke's land as a franklin or work one of the town's fishing boats. Both prospects were equally unattractive, but he couldn't imagine leaving Grady. Pug remembered what Megard told him the night before. The old cook had cautioned him about fretting too much over the choosing. After all, he had pointed out, there are many apprentices who had never advanced to the rank of journeyman, and when all things were taken into account, there are more men without craft in Grady than with. Megar had glossed over the fact that many fishers and farmers' sons forsook the choosing, electing to follow their fathers. Pug wondered if Megar was so removed from his own choosing. He could remember that the boys who were not chosen would stand before the assembling a company of craftmasters, householders, and newly chosen apprentices under the gaze until the last name was called, and they were dismissed in shame. Biting his lower lip, Pug tried to hide his nervousness. He was not the sort to jump from the heights of sailor's grief should he not be chosen, as some had done in the past. but he couldn't bear the idea of facing those who had been chosen. Thomas, he stood next to his shorter friend, threw Pug a smile. He knew Pug was fretting, but could not feel entirely sympathetic as his own excitement mounted. His father had admitted that he would be the first called by Swordmaster Fanon. Moreover, the Swordmaster had confided that should Thomas do well in training, he might be found a place in the Duke's personal guard. It would be a signal honor, and would improve Thomas's. Hey, welcome back, Gummy. Going to get some cookies? Okay. Yeah, I need all the stretching right now. I turned all the redeems off. And there's no sound alerts. Yep, no bubble. Down below. Yep. All the hydration is gone. All the redeems have disappeared. What's wrong? Random. Dios mío. Je ne sais quoi. Where was I? He poked Pug in the ribs with an elbow, where Duke's herald had come out upon the balcony, overlooking the courtyard. The herald signaled to the guard, who opened the small door in the great gate, and the grass masters entered. They crossed the stand at the foot of the broad stairs of the keep. As was traditional, they stood with their backs to the boys, waiting upon the Duke. The large oaken doors of the keep began to swing out ponderously, and several guards in the Duke's brown and gold darted through to take up their positions on the steps. Upon each tabard was emblazoned the golden gold of Grady, and above that a small golden crown, marking the Duke a member of the royal family. Okay. See you, sir. Let's turn the music for me. There you go. The herald shouted, hearken to me, his grace, Burg Condoin, 3rd Duke of Crady, Prince of the Kingdom, Lord of Crady, Curse and Tulan, Warden of the West, Knight General of the King's armies, heir presumptive to the throne of Rhiannon. The Duke stood patiently while a list of officers was completed, then stepped forward into the sunlight. Past 50, the Duke of Crady still moved with the fluid grace and powerful step of a born warrior. Except for the grey at the temples of his dark brown hair, he looked younger than his age by 20 years. He was dressed from neck to boot in black, as he had been for the last 7 years, for he still mourned the loss of his beloved wife, Catherine. At his side hung a black scabbard sword with a silver hilt, and upon his hand his ducal signet ring, the only ornamentation he permitted himself. The herald raised his voice. Their Royal Highnesses, Princess Liam Condoin and Arutha Condoin, heirs of the House of Crady, knight captains of the King's Army of the West, princes of the Royal House of Rhiannon. Both sons stepped forward to stand behind their father. The 2 young men were 6 and 4 years older than their princesses. The Duke having read late, but a difference between the awkward candidates for apprenticeship, the sons of the Duke was much more than a few years in age. Both princes appeared calm and self-possessed. Liam, the older, stood on his father's right, a blonde, powerfully built man. His open smile was the image of his mother's, and he looked always on the verge of laughter. He was dressed in a bright blue tunic and yellow leggings, and wore a closely trimmed beard, as blonde as his shoulder-length hair. Arutha was the shadows, and night as Liam was the light and day. He stood nearly as tall as his mother and father, but while they were powerfully built, he was ranky to the point of gauntness. He wore a brown tunic and russet leggings. His hair was dark, his face clean shaven. Everything about Arutha gave one the feeling of quickness. His strength was in his speed. Speed with rapier, speed with wits. His humor was dry and often sharp. While Liam was openly loved by a Duke's subject, Arutha was respected and admired for his ability, but not regarded with warmth by the people. Together, the 2 sons seemed to capture most of the complex nature of the desire, for the Duke was capable of both Liam's robust humor and Arutha's dark moods. They are nearly opposites in temperament, but both capable men who would benefit the country and kingdom in years to come. The Duke loved both his sons. The herald again spoke. The Princess Caroline, daughter of the royal house, the slim and graceful girl who made her entrance was the same age as the boys who stood below, but already beginning to show the poise and grace of one born to rule and the beauty of her late mother. Her soft yellow gown contrasted strikingly with her nearly black hair. Her eyes were Liam's blue, as her mother's had been, and Liam beamed when his sister took her to her father's arm. Even Arutha ventured one of his rare half smiles, for his sister was dear to him also. Many boys in the keep harbored a secret love for the princess, a fact she often turned to her advantage. Hey! Thank you for following our scaredy cat and got box-eyed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Rockets! I apologize, but those are just stars to me, unless it just means ass. But yeah. But thank you, Princess. How you doing? You doing good? I am doing a... Well, this is something different for me. I am doing a reading stream. As you can see, the book title is up there. And I would usually be playing games, but some people were wanting to hear me read, so I thought, why not give it a try? So this is the book I've chosen to read, and I hope you enjoy it. But yeah, thank you for coming by. Where was I? The Duke's court then entered Pug and Thomas. Oh, certainly. Hold up. The Duke's court then entered. Puck and Thomas could see all the members of the Duke's staff were present, including Colgan. Pug had glimpsed him in the castle from time to time since the night of the storm, and they had exchanged words once, Colgan inquiring as to his well-being. But mostly the magician was absent from sight. Pug was a little surprised to see the magician, for he was not properly considered a full member of the Duke's household, but rather as sometime advisor. Most of the time Colgan was unconcerned in his tower, hidden from view as he did whatever magicians do in such places. Oh. Where was I? Why, how did you find me, Princess, if you don't mind me asking? Where was I? That's it. Pug was, yeah. Most of the time, Koken, yeah, that's it. The magician was deep in conversation with Father Tully, a priest of Astalon, the builder, and one. Yep, certainly. And one of the Duke's oldest aides. Tully had been advisor to the Duke's father, and had seemed old then. He now appeared ancient, at least to Pug's useful perspective, but his eyes betrayed no sign of senility. Many a keep boy had been impaled upon the pointed gaze of those clear grey eyes. His wit and tongue were equally youthful, and more than once a keen boy had wished for a session with Horsemaster Alkin's leather strap, rather than a tongue latching from Father Tully. The white-haired priest could nearly strip the skin of a miscreant's back with his caustic words. Nearby stood one who had experienced Tully's wrath upon occasion, Squire Roland, son of Baron Tulbert of Tullan, one of Duke's vassals. He was a companion to both princess, being the only other boy of notable birth in the keep. His father had sent him to Crady the year before to learn something of the management of the duchy and the ways of the Duke's court. In the rather rough frontier court, Roland's discovered a home away from home. He was already something of a rogue when he arrived, but his infectious sense of humor and ready wit often eased much of the anger that resulted from his prankish ways. It was Roland, more often than not, who was the Princess Caroline's accomplice in whatever mischief she was embarked upon. Hold up. Let me get some water. I'll be right back. Hey Jazzy, how you doing? You doing good? And thank you for stopping by. We are doing a reading stream. Okay, so where was I? That's it. With light brown hair. Hey, Faya! With light brown hair and blue eyes, Roland stood tall for his age. He was a year older than the gathered boys and had played often with them over the last year, as Liam and Dorotha were frequently busy with court duties. Thomas and he had been boyish rivals at first, then fast friends. Friends, with Pug becoming his friend by default, because where Thomas was, Pug was certain to be nearby. Roland saw Pug fidgeting near the edge of the assembled boys and gave him a slight nod and wink. Pug grinned briefly for a while. He was as often the butt of Roland's jokes as any other. He still found himself liking the wild young squire. Yeah, well, I apologize. And plus, this is Faya. Nope, you're not nibbling the cables. That's Faya, not Raven. Where was I? Right. After all his court was in attendance, the Duke spoke. Yesterday was the last day of the 11th year of the reign of our Lord King, Roderick IV. Today is the festival of Banapis. The following day will find these boys gathered here, counted among the men of Grady. Boys no longer, but apprentices and free men. At this time it is proper for me to inquire if any among you wishes to be released from service to Dutchery. Are there any among you who so wish? The question is formal in nature, and no response was expected, for few ever wished to leave Grady. But one boy did step forward. The herald asked, "Who seeks release of his service?" It was not fair. Mwah. The boy looked down, clearly nervous, clearing his throat. He said, I am Robert, son of Eugen. Pug knew him, but not well. He was a net mender's son, a town boy, and they rarely mixed with the keep boys. Pug had played with him upon a few occasions, and had the sense the lad was well regarded. It was a rare thing to refuse service, and Pug was curious as to hear the reasons. The Duke spoke kindly. What is your purpose, Robert, son of Hugon? Your Grace, my father is unable to take me into his craft, for my 4 brothers are well able to ascend to the craft as journeymen and masters after him. As there are many other net menders' sons, my eldest brother is now married and has a son of his own, so my family no longer has room for me in the house. If I may not stay with my family and practice my father's craft, I beg your Grace's leave to take service as a sailor. The Duke considered the matter. Robert was not the first village boy to be called by the slur of the sea. Yeah. Mwah. Have you found a master willing to take you into his company? Yes, your Grace. Captain Gregson, master of ship Green Deep from Margrave's port is willing. I know this man, said the Duke. Smiling slightly, he said, he is a good and fair man. I recommend you into his service, and wish you well in your travels. You will be welcomed at Grady whenever you return with your ship. Robert bowed a little stiffly and left the courtyard, his part in the choosing done. Pug wondered at Robert's adventuresome choice. In less than a minute, the boy had renounced his ties with his family and home, and was now a citizen of a city he had never seen. It was custom that a sailor was considered to own his loyalty to the city that was his ship's home port. Margrave's port was on the free city of Natal, on the bitter sea, and was now Robert's home. The Duke indicated the herald should continue. The herald announced the first of craft masters, sailmaker Holm, who called the names of 3 boys. All 3 took service, and none seemed displeased. The choosing went smoothly, as no boy refused service. Each boy went to stand next to his new master. As the afternoon wore on, and the number of boys diminished, Pug became more and more uncomfortable. Soon there were only 2 boys besides Pug and Thomas, standing in the center of the court. All the craftmasters had called their apprentices, and only 2 of the Duke's household staff, beside the swordmaster, had not been heard from. Pug studied the group on the top of the steps, his heart pounding with anxiety. The 2 princess regarded the boys, Liam with a friendly smile, Arutha brooding on some thought or another. The princess, Caroline, was bored by the entire affair, and took little pains to hide the fact as she was whispering to Roland. Yes. I'm not good with my breathing, Owl. This brought a disapproving look from Lady Marina, her governess. Horsemaster Alcon came forth, his brown and golden tabard bearing a small horse head embroidered over his left breast. The horsemaster called the name of Rolf. Oh, break. I'll wait for a break to end and I'll continue. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Like, my throat is certainly very parched at the moment, and I am needing to constantly refill my water. But it has ended. Time to continue the story then, isn't it? Oh, certainly, Owl. I will not back off just yet. So, shall I continue then? Oh, make sure. I'll breathe even deeper. Oh, yes, always the cookies, isn't it? Ah, well, c'est la vie, isn't it? D'accord. Where am I? That's it. Horsemaster Alcon came forth, his brown and golden tabard. The horsemaster called the name of Wolf, son of Dick, and a stocky son of Duke's stableman walked over to stand behind the master. When he turned, he smiled condescendingly at Pug. The two boys had never gotten along. The pox-scarred boy spending many hours taunting and tormenting Pug, while they both worked in the stable under Dick, The stableman had looked the other way whenever his son sprang a trap on Pug, and the orphan always held responsible for any difficulty that arose. It had been a terrible period for Pug, and the boy had vowed to refuse service rather than face the prospect of working next to Wolf the rest of his life. Oscar Samuel called the other boy, Geoffrey, who had become a member of the castle's serving staff, leaving Pug and Thomas standing alone. Hold on, let's raise my volume up a little bit. There we go. Swordmaster Fannin then stepped forward, and Pug felt his heart stand still as the old soldier called Thomas, son of Megar. There was a pause, and Pug waited to hear his own name called. But Fannin stepped back, and Thomas crossed over to stand alongside him. Pug felt dwarfed by the gaze of all upon him. The courtyard was now larger than he had ever remembered it, and he felt ill-fashioned and poorly dressed. His heart sank in his chest as he realized that there was no craftmaster or staff member present who had not taken an apprentice. He had been the only boy uncalled. Fighting back tears, he waited the Duke to dismiss the company. As the Duke started to speak, sympathy for the boy shone clearly in his face. He was interrupted by another voice. Where am I? Your Grace, if you'd be so kind. All eyes turned to see Colgan, the magician, step forward. I have need of an apprentice, and I would call Pug, orphan of the keep, to service. A wave of murmuring swept through the assembled craftmasters. A few voices could be heard saying it was improper for a magician to participate in the choosing. The Duke silenced them with a sweep of his gaze, his face stern. No craftmaster would challenge Duke of Crady, the third-ranking noble in the kingdom, over the standing of one boy. Slowly all eyes returned to regard the boy. The Duke said, as Colgan is a recognized master of his craft, it is his right to choose. Pug, orphan of the keep, will you take service? Pug stood rigid. He had imagined himself leading the king's army into battle as a knight lieutenant, or discovering someday he was the lost son of nobility. In his boyish imaginations, he had sailed ships, hunted great monsters, and saved the nation. In quieter moments of reflection, he had wondered if he would spend his life building ships, making pottery, or learning the trader's skill, and speculate on how well he would do in each of those crafts. But one thing he never thought of, the one dream that never captured his fantasies, was that of becoming a magician. He snapped out of his shocked state, aware the Duke patiently awaited his response. He looked at the faces of those before him. Ratatouille gave him one of his rare smiles, as did Prince Arutha. Prince Liam nodded a slight yes, and Colgan regarded him intently. There were signs of worry upon the magician's face, and suddenly Pug decided. It may not be entirely proper calling, but any craft is better than none. Yes, the cookie bubbles are gone. Hey kitty, how you doing? You doing good? Because I do not want any redeems in the stream to interrupt the calm reading. I do not wish the chaos to be happening, disturbing the calmness of the writing. Thank you, kitty. I am doing an ASMR reading today of a book. I apologize for being a bit too loud. A bit too loud there. Apologize, I spiked the thingy a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I'm not too bad. Okay, I should take this jacket off though. Getting a bit too warm. Yeah, so as you can see, I am doing a reading stream. I am reading the book title that is up there. It's a nice and relaxing stream today. Doing some ASMR, and I hope you enjoy it. I am so as I get going. Yeah, do I sound better, kitty? Should I do this more often? Well, this is more used as my ASMR voice. As a redeem, although I took away all the redeems, so there'll be no chaos during the stream. So, where was I? He looked at the faces of those before him. He stepped forward and caught his own heel with his other foot and landed face down into the dust. Really, Owl? Ay, Dios mío. Picking himself up, he half scrambled, half ran to the magician's side. The misstep broke the tension, and the Duke's booming laughter filled the courtyard. Flushing with embarrassment, Puck stood behind Colgan. He looked around the broad curve of his new master and found the Duke watching, his expression tempered by a kind nod at the blushing Pug. The Duke turned back to those who stood waiting for the choosing to end. I declare that each boy present is now the charge of his master, to obey him in all matters within the laws of the kingdom, and each shall be judged a true and proper man of Grady. Let the apprentices attend to their masters. Until the feasting, I bid you all a good day. He turned and presented his left arm to his daughter. She placed her hand lightly upon it, and they passed into the keep between the ranks of the courtiers, who drew aside. The two princes followed, and the others of the court. Pug saw Thomas leave in the direction of the guard barracks behind Master Fannin. He turned his attention back to Culkin, who was standing lost in thought. After a moment, the magician said, "I trust neither of us has made a mistake this day." "Sir?" Pug asked, not understanding the magician's meaning. Culkin waved one hand absently, causing his pale yellow robe to move like waves rippling over the sea. "It is no matter, boy. What's done is done. Let us make the best of things." He placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Come, let us retire to a tower as I reside." There's a small room below my own that should do for you. I had intended it for some project or another, but have never managed to find the time to prepare it. Pug stood in awe. A room of my own? Such a thing for an apprentice was unheard of. Most apprentices slept in the workrooms of their master, or protected herds, or the like. Only when an apprentice became a journeyman was it usual for him to take private quarters. Kogan arched one bushy eyebrow. "Of course, I can't have you underfoot all the time. I would never get anything done. Besides, magic requires solitude for contemplation. You will need to be untroubled as much as, or perhaps more than I will." He took out his long, thin pipe from a fold of his robe and started to stuff it full of tobacco from a pouch that also came from within his robe. "Let's not bother with too much discussion of duties and such, boy, for in truth I am not prepared for you. But in short order I will have things well in hand. Until then, we can use the time by becoming acquainted with one another. Agreed?" Pug was startled. He had little notion of what a magician was about, in spite of the night spent with Kogan weeks ago. But he readily knew that craftmasters were like, and none would have the thought to inquire whether or not an apprentice agreed with his plans. Too much for you, Al, isn't it? Well, we're stopping by, isn't it, then? See you on Tuesday, then, isn't it? Poor Owl. Not knowing what to say, Pug just nodded. "Good, then," said Kogan. "Let us be off to the tower to find you some good new clothes. And then we'll spend the balance of the day feasting." Later, there will be ample time to learn how to be master and apprentice. With a smile for a boy, the stout magician turned, looked around and led them away. The late afternoon was clear and bright, with a gentle breeze from the sea cooling the summer heat. Throughout the keep of the Castle Grady and the town below, preparations for the festival of Banapis were in progress. Banapis was the oldest known holiday, its origins lost in antiquity. It was held each Midsummer's Day, a day belonged to neither the past nor the coming year. Banapis, known by other names in other nations, was celebrated over the entire world of Medgima, Gimina, according to legend. It is believed by some that the festival was borrowed from the elves and dwarves. The long-lived races were said to have celebrated the feast of midsummer as far as back as the memory of both races could recall. Most authorities disputed this allegation, citing no reason other than the unlikelihood of humans borrowing anything from the elven or dwarven folk. It is rumored that even the denizens of the Northlands, the Goblin tribes, and the clans of the Brotherhood of the Dark Path celebrated Banapis, though no one had ever reported seeing such a celebration. The courtyard was busy. Huge tables had been erected to hold the myriad varieties of foods that had been in preparation for over a week. Giant barrels of dwarven ale imported from Stone Mountain had been hauled out of the cellars and were resting on protesting overburdened wood frames. The workmen, alarmed at the fragile appearance of the barrel ricks, were quickly emptying some of the contents. Meager came out of the kitchen and angrily shooed them away. Leave off. There'll be none left for the evening meal at this rate. Back to the kitchen, dolts. There's much work to be done yet. God, I've been speaking for almost 3 hours. Wow. That's certainly something. How about let's finish this chapter. I feel like I've been doing a chapter an hour actually. It's not too bad actually. Because I'm starting on the 3rd chapter soon. The workers went off grumbling, and Megar filled a tankard to ensure the ale was at proper temperature. After he drained it dry and satisfied himself that all was as it should be, he returned to the kitchen. There was no formal beginning to the feast. Traditionally, people and food, wine and ale all accumulated accumulated until they reached a certain density. Then all at once the festivities would be in full swing. Accumulate, accumulated. That's it. That's the word. Accumulated. His room in the northmost tower, the magician's tower as it had become known, provided him with a shortcut through the kitchen, which he used rather than the main doors of the keep. He beamed as he sped across the courtyard in his new tunic and trousers. He had never worn such finery and was in a hurry to show his friend Thomas. He found Thomas leaving the soldiers' common, nearly as much in a hurry as Pug. When the two met, they both spoke at once. "Look at my tunic," said Pug. "Look at my soldier's tabard," said Thomas. Both stopped and broke into laughter. Thomas regained his composure first. "Those are very fine clothes, Pug," he said, fingering the expensive material of Pug's red tunic. "And the color suits you." Pug returned to comments, for Thomas did cut a striking figure in his brown and gold tabard. It was of little consequence that he wore his regular homespun tunic and trouser underneath. He would not receive his soldier's uniform until Master Fallon was satisfied with his worthiness as a man-at-arms. Scusi. The two friends wandered from one heavily laden table to the other. Pug's mouth watered from the rich fragrances in the air. They came to a table heaped with meat pies, steam rising from their hot crusts, pungent cheeses, and hot bread. At the table, a young kitchen boy was stationed with a shoe fly. His job was to keep pests from the food, whether of the insect variety or the chronically hungry apprentice variety. Like most other situations involving boys, the relationship between this guardian of the feast and the other older princes was closely bound by tradition. It is considered ill-mannered and in poor taste merely to threaten or bully the smaller boy into parting with food before the start of the feast. But it is considered fair to use guile, stealth, or speed in gaining a prize from the table. Pug and Thomas observed with interest as the boy, named John, delivered a wicked rack to the hand of one young apprentice seeking to snag a large pie. With a nod of his head, Thomas sent Pug to the far side of the table. Pug ambled across upon John's field of vision, and the boy watched him carefully. Pug moved abruptly, a feint towards the table, and John leaned in his direction. Then suddenly Thomas snatched the puff pastry from the table and was gone before the shoe fly lash began to descend. As they ran from the table, Pug and Thomas could hear the distressed cries of the boy whose table they had plundered. Thomas gave Pug half the pie when they were safely away, and the smaller apprentice laughed. "You're the quickest hand in the castle, I bet." For young John was slow of eye, but keeping it on you. They shared a laugh, Pug popped his half-full pie into his mouth. It was delicately seasoned, and the contrast between the salty pork filling and the sweet puff pastry crust was delicious. The sound of pipes and drums came from the side courtyard as the Duke's magicians approached the main courtyard. By the time they had emerged around the keep, a silent message seemed to pass through the crowd. Suddenly, the kitchen boys were busy handing out wooden platters for the celebrations to heap food upon, and mugs of ale and wine were being drawn from the barrels. The boys dashed to a place in line at the first table. Pug and Thomas used their size and quickness to good advantage, dashing through the throng, snagging food at every description, and a large mug of foamy ale each. They found a relatively quiet corner and fell to with ravenous hunger. Pug tasted his first drink of ale and was surprised at the robust, slightly bitter taste. It seemed to warm him as it went down, and after another experimental taste, he decided that he liked it. Pug could see the Duke and his family mingling with the common folk. Other members of his court could also be seen standing in line before the tables. There was no ceremony, ritual, or rank observed this afternoon. Each served as they arrived, for Midsummer's Day was the time when all would equally share in the bounties of the harvest. Pug caught a glimpse of the princess, and he felt his chest tighten a little. She looked radiant, as many of the boys in the courtyard complimented her on her appearance. She wore a lovely gown of deep blue and a simple, broad-brimmed hat of the same color. She thanked each author of a flattering remark, and used her dark eyelashes and bright smile to good advantage, leaving a wake of infatuated boys behind. Jugglers and clowns made their appearance in the courtyard. The first of many groups of traveling performers who were in the town for the festival. The actors of another company had set up a stage in the town square and would give a performance in the evening. Until the early hours of the next morning, the festivities would continue. Pug knew that many of the boys the year before had to be excused due to the day of following Banapis, for the heads and stomachs were in no condition for honest work. He was sure that scene would be repeated tomorrow. Pug looked forward to the evening, for it was the custom for new apprentices to visit many of the houses in town, receiving congratulations and mugs of ale. It was also a ripe time for meeting the town girls. While dalliance was not unknown, it was frowned upon, but mothers tended to be less vigilant during Banapis, as the boys had crafts and were viewed less as bothersome pests and more as potential son-in-laws. And there had been more than one case of a mother looking the other way, while a daughter used her natural gifts to snare her young husband. Pug, being of small stature and youthful appearance, got little notice from the girls of the keep. Thomas, however, was more and more the object of girlish flirtation as he grew in size and good looks, and lately Pug had begun to be aware that his friend was being sized up by one or another of the castle girls. Pug was still young enough to think the whole thing silly, but old enough to be fascinated by it. Pug chewed an improbable mouthful. Not yawning, more taking a deep breath. People from the town and keep past offering congratulations on the boys' apprenticeship and wishing them a good new year. Yeah, exactly. Pug felt a deep sense of rightness about everything. He was an apprentice, even if Kelgan seemed completely unsure of what to do with him. He was well fed and on his way to being slightly intoxicated, which contributed to a sense of well-being. And most important, he was among friends. There can't be much more to life than this, he thought. And with this, we shall stop, for we are on the start of chapter 3 of the book. We shall find someone new to read out to. As I feel dizzy from the reading and me trying to take breaths. Who shall we read out to is the question. Let's see, who is live is the question. Huh. Oh, Bubba is live. Yeah, let's wait on him. Okay.
I better show you cheese on crackers, nice.
As the saying goes. Exactly. Thank you for coming. Thank you, chats, and thank you for being here in general. Without you guys, I would not be here at all. A massive thank you to Top Down for the raid of 7. Thank you so much. And thank you for the... Was there a follow? Yeah, and thank you for a follow, Princess. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope we will have a wonderful morning, day, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever time it is. Please go get some food, water, drink, or go to the toilet or sleep if you need to. Please do that after stream care. And with that being said, we shall read out to an awesome person called The Shit Show, or I like to call him Bubba. He is streaming Fortnite. So please pass on the love and support that you give me and pass it on to him. He is an awesome streamer. Exactly, nothing to clean. Yeah, and as always, the raid message the Cookie Box Club has entered. The Riverdale and me eating the cookies is the subbed, while the purple hearts and the non-cookies is the followed. The next stream will be on Tuesday. I might actually do some Final Fantasy. Who knows? Or actually do some Horizon Zero Dawn. We shall see and find out. And with that being said and done, I think it's time to say goodbye and adieu. Adios.